Someone moved my property line 20 feet and thought I'd never noticed. The ambulance couldn't move. Rain hammered the canyon while red and blue lights flashed across my locked steel gate. On the other side stood an angry HOA president, a crowd of homeowners, and a sheriff holding a folder that nobody wanted him to open. 6 months earlier, I came home to my late father's 1,200-acre Wyoming ranch and found a red property line that didn't belong there. What started as one misplaced marker led to hidden records, a secret warning, and a discovery that could shake an entire subdivision. And the deeper I dug, the more one question refused to go away. Who moved that line? And what were they trying to hide? If you enjoy stories about ranch life, land rights, HOA battles, and ordinary folks standing their ground with facts instead of noise, take a second to subscribe. We've got plenty more stories ahead, and this one is only getting started. The ambulance couldn't move. Its emergency lights flashed against the steel gate at the entrance to my ranch, painting the canyon walls red and blue every few seconds. Rain hammered the gravel road hard enough to blur headlights, and 20 or 30 people stood in the mud shouting at me like I'd personally caused the storm. Inside Ridgecrest Estates, somewhere beyond the canyon, an elderly resident was reportedly having chest pains, and the only road leading into that subdivision stopped right where I was standing. At my gate. "You've lost your mind." Vanessa Holloway's voice cut through the rain. She pushed through the crowd wearing an expensive waterproof coat that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. Her blonde hair was soaked, but she didn't seem to care. All she cared about was the gate. "Open it!" she screamed. "Right now." I said nothing. That only made her angrier. For 6 months, Vanessa had treated every conversation like a courtroom argument she expected to win. She was the kind of person who mistook volume for authority. People like that hate silence. The crowd started joining in. What kind of person blocks an ambulance? Someone could die. "This is public access. Open the damn gate." I kept my hands in my jacket pockets and watched the rain roll down the steel bars. The gate hadn't been closed by accident. It hadn't been locked out of spite. And despite what everyone standing there believed, I wasn't breaking any law. A pair of Sheriff's Department trucks pulled onto the shoulder behind the ambulance. The driver's door opened. Sheriff Tom Briggs stepped out. The moment I saw him, I knew somebody had escalated this far beyond a neighborhood dispute. Tom had been sheriff for nearly 15 years. He wasn't the kind of man who enjoyed being dragged into HOA drama in the middle of a thunderstorm. His expression confirmed it. He walked toward me while rain dripped from the brim of his hat. "Ethan." "Tom." He glanced at the crowd, then at the ambulance, then at the locked gate. "You want to tell me what's going on?" Vanessa didn't even let me answer. "What's going on?" she snapped. "He's holding 250 families hostage." Several homeowners immediately nodded. "He's blocking emergency access. This road belongs to Ridgecrest. He thinks he owns everything." Tom raised one hand. Not loudly, not aggressively, just enough. The crowd quieted. Then he looked at me. "Ethan?" I reached into my truck and pulled out a weatherproof document case, the same one I'd spent months assembling. County records, survey maps, property transfers, easement documents, every piece of paper that mattered. I handed it to him, start with the blue tabs. Tom frowned. Then he opened the case. The crowd waited. Rain fell. The ambulance engine idled. Nobody spoke. At first, Tom's face showed confusion, then concentration, then something else. something I hadn't expected to see. Concern. Vanessa noticed it too. "Don't listen to him," she said immediately. Tom ignored her. He turned another page, then another. The rain seemed louder somehow. Finally, he looked up. Not at me. At Vanessa Holloway. She straightened immediately. "Yes?" His voice was careful. Too careful. The kind of careful people use when they're trying to confirm something before saying it out loud. "Did your HOA board know this roadway crosses private property owned by Mr. Mercer?" The crowd fell silent. Not gradually. Instantly. Vanessa blinked. "What?" Tom held up one of the documents. "This road is located on Mercer Ranch property. That's ridiculous. According to county records, it's community infrastructure. According to county records." The same answer. Calm, simple, dangerous. Vanessa laughed. But it sounded forced. Like she needed everyone around her to believe she wasn't worried. "That's impossible." Tom flipped another page. The emergency access agreement listed here expired decades ago. Now even the homeowners looked confused. A man near the ambulance stepped forward. "Wait." Nobody answered him. He looked between Tom and Vanessa. "Expired?" Vanessa's jaw tightened. "That doesn't mean anything." Tom kept reading. "I noticed something interesting." For the first time all night, Vanessa stopped looking at me. She started looking at the paperwork. That told me exactly where her confidence ended. A woman standing beside her spoke up. "Vanessa?" No answer. Another homeowner frowned. "Did the HOA know about this?" Still no answer. The rain pounded harder against the steel gate. Somewhere behind us, thunder rolled across the canyon. The paramedics remained inside the ambulance. Waiting. Watching. Nobody wanted to move until they understood who actually had authority here. Vanessa suddenly stepped toward me. Close enough that only a few people could hear her. Her voice dropped. The anger disappeared. Panic replaced it. "Open the gate." I looked at her. For months, she had called me unreasonable, obstructive, selfish. Her lawyers had described me as a threat to community development. Now she sounded different. Now she sounded scared. "Open it," she repeated. I shook my head. "You sued me." "Ethan, for 6 months." The crowd listened. "You told the county I was interfering with public infrastructure." "Ethan, this isn't the time." "You said this road belonged to Ridge Crest." Vanessa's face hardened, but she didn't deny it. That mattered. Behind her, another homeowner raised his voice. "Vanessa, what's he talking about?" Then another, and "Why does the sheriff have documents saying the road is private?" Questions started spreading through the crowd faster than the rain. Confusion replacing certainty. Doubt replacing anger. The shift was small, but I could feel it. People were starting to realize there might be another side to the story. Tom closed the folder, very carefully. Then he looked at me. "Ethan." I nodded. He looked toward the gate, then back at the crowd. When he spoke, every voice stopped. "Based on the records I've reviewed tonight, nobody can compel Mr. Mercer to open this gate." The silence that followed was heavier than the storm. Vanessa actually stepped backward. One homeowner cursed under his breath. Another simply stared. The entire foundation beneath Ridge Crest had just cracked, and they didn't even know how deep the fracture went. Then a new voice spoke from near the ambulance. Quiet, nervous. A county engineer I'd seen at planning meetings. I recognized him immediately. He looked pale, even in the flashing lights. Vanessa. She turned. What? The engineer swallowed. Hard. Then glanced at the document case. At Tom. At me. I think we need to talk about the Phase 2 permits. Vanessa's face went white. Not angry white, not shocked white, terrified white. And standing there in the rain, watching the most confident woman in Ridgecrest suddenly look like she wanted to disappear, I finally understood something. This was never just about a road. Somebody had hidden something. Something big enough that a single folder of county records could make an entire subdivision panic. The question wasn't whether Ridgecrest had a problem. The question was how long they'd known about it. And the answer started with a red line someone had moved months earlier. At the time, I had no idea it would lead to lawsuits, county hearings, and a locked gate standing between an HOA and its own future. All I knew was that something felt wrong. I came back to Mercer Ranch 11 months after my father's funeral. 1,200 acres stretched across the Wyoming foothills exactly the way I remembered them. The cattle pastures, the creek crossings, the weathered fences my father spent decades maintaining. Most people saw an old ranch. I saw systems. I'd spent 20 years working as a civil engineer. Roads, drainage, easements, infrastructure. My brain noticed details whether I wanted it to or not. The first 2 days were normal. I checked fence lines, inspected cattle gates, walked the creek that cut through the eastern section of the property. Then I found the red line. It was painted across a series of survey stakes near the canyon road. Fresh paint. Bright enough to stand out against the dirt. The problem wasn't the line itself. The problem was where it sat. I stopped walking immediately. Because according to every property map I'd ever seen, that line shouldn't have been there. It was too far inside my ranch. About 20 feet too far. At first I thought I was remembering wrong. My father had always handled the surveys. Maybe I was mistaken. Then I spotted the boundary marker. A steel survey pin set in concrete. Or at least what looked like one. I walked over, kneeled beside it, and felt my stomach tighten. The concrete around the base looked newer than it should have. Not decades old. Recent. Disturbed. Like somebody had dug it up and reset it, stared at it for a long moment. Then I pulled out my phone and took pictures. Lots of them. Different angles. Different distances. The kind of habit engineering teaches you. Document first. Ask questions later. That afternoon, I drove into town. The county records office sat behind the courthouse in a brick building that looked older than half the county. The clerk behind the desk recognized my last name immediately. Mercer Ranch? I nodded. She smiled. Your father practically lived in here. That sounded about right. My father trusted paperwork more than promises. Back then, I thought he was stubborn. Later, I'd realize he was smart. The clerk helped me pull old survey maps from storage. Within 20 minutes, I had confirmation. The red line wasn't where it belonged, not even close. The original boundary sat almost 20 feet west of the current marker location. I looked at the map, then at the photographs on my phone, then back at the map. There was no way around it. Someone had physically moved a legal property marker. I felt anger rise for the first time. Not explosive anger, the dangerous kind, the quiet kind. Because boundary markers don't wander. They don't shift naturally, and nobody moves one by accident. When I got back to the ranch, I drove the canyon road slowly. That was when I started noticing other things. Fresh tire tracks, construction flags, survey ribbons hanging from brush, small details. But all of them pointed in the same direction, toward Ridge Crest Estates. The subdivision sat beyond the eastern canyon. New homes, expensive homes, the kind built by developers who liked words like luxury and exclusive. I hadn't paid much attention to it before. Now I started paying attention. The next morning I parked near the road entrance and watched traffic. School buses, delivery trucks, construction vehicles. Every single one crossed my property. Nobody hesitated. Nobody asked permission. They drove through like they owned the place. Around noon, an older rancher named Wade Harper pulled his pickup alongside mine. Wade owned land 2 parcels north of me. He rolled down the window. "You finally noticed it, huh?" I frowned. Noticed what? The red line. That got my attention. "You know about it?" Wade snorted. Hard not to. Hard. Ridgecrest's been acting like they own that canyon for years. I looked toward the subdivision. What exactly are they doing? Building. He pointed toward the eastern ridge. More houses, more lots, bigger plans. Using my road. Using your everything. That wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the answer I needed. Wade leaned one arm out the window. "You ever meet Vanessa Holloway?" The name meant nothing to me. No. His expression darkened. "You will." "Who is she?" HOA president. The way he said it told me plenty. Problem? Wade laughed once, without humor. Depends. On what? Whether you like people deciding your property belongs to them. That evening, I sat at my father's old kitchen table with survey maps spread across the surface. The same table where he'd balanced ranch accounts for years. The same table where he'd once told me something I never forgot. People don't steal land anymore, Ethan. They steal access. Back then I thought it sounded paranoid. Now I wasn't so sure. I looked again at the photographs of the relocated marker, the fresh red line, the survey stakes, the construction flags. Someone wanted that road. Someone needed that road. And somebody had already started changing the map before asking permission. The real question wasn't whether a boundary marker had been moved. The real question was who thought they could get away with it. 3 days later, I got my answer. Her name was Vanessa Holloway, and she was waiting for me in the middle of my road. Not beside it, not near it, directly across it. A white golf cart blocked the gravel lane while 2 men in reflective vests stood nearby holding survey equipment. Orange flags marked a path through the grass beyond my fence line. My fence line. I slowed my truck and stopped 20 feet away. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Vanessa smiled. It was the kind of smile people use when they think they've already won. I climbed out of the truck. "Can I help you?" "Actually," she said, "I think we're here to help you." That immediately told me what kind of conversation this was going to be. One of the surveyors glanced down at his clipboard. The other avoided eye contact completely. Vanessa stepped forward. Tall, confident, perfectly dressed, despite standing in the middle of a ranch road. "Ethan Mercer, right? You already know who I am. We've heard a lot about you." That wasn't reassuring. I looked at the survey equipment. What exactly are you doing on my property? Vanessa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the eastern ridge. Ridge Crest Estates is beginning Phase 2 expansion. There it was, the same expansion Wade Harper had mentioned. The surveyor shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa continued. We're preparing future infrastructure corridors. I almost laughed. Infrastructure corridors. Developers loved changing ordinary words into expensive words. Road became corridor. Creek became drainage asset. Private property became development opportunity. You mean you're surveying land? If you'd like to simplify it. I'm trying to simplify trespassing. That smile faded slightly. Only slightly. The surveyor closest to me cleared his throat. Ma'am. Vanessa ignored him. Big mistake. People who ignore their own experts usually have something to hide. She folded her arms. The county has approved preliminary planning. On Ridge Crest property. On property connected to Ridge Crest. I looked at the orange markers. Some sat hundreds of feet beyond the legal easement area. There wasn't even an argument about that. They were deep inside Mercer Ranch. Who gave you permission? Vanessa's answer came too quickly. The Planning Commission. Not what I asked. I noticed the surveyor looking increasingly uncomfortable. What I asked was, who gave you permission to enter my land? Silence. Then the surveyor finally spoke. Technically, Vanessa turned toward him immediately. He stopped talking. Interesting. Very interesting. I walked toward one of the markers, pulled it out of the ground, and tossed it into the truck bed. The surveyor looked relieved. Vanessa looked furious. What are you doing? Removing trash from my property. Her jaw tightened. Those are official survey markers. No. I pointed toward the county survey pin still visible near the road. That's an HOA official survey marker. Neither surveyor argued. That told me everything. Vanessa noticed it too. Ethan, you're creating unnecessary conflict. I laughed. For the first time since meeting her, you're standing on my land. Ridgecrest contains over 200 families. And they depend on this access route. Access route, not road. Interesting choice of words. I leaned against my truck. Vanessa, how much of your subdivision uses this road every day? Her eyes narrowed. Everyone. And how many entrances does Ridgecrest have? No answer. The surveyors suddenly became very interested in their equipment. That answer mattered. A lot. Vanessa changed the subject. We should be discussing partnership opportunities. There it was. The real reason she was here. Not surveying, negotiating, or at least attempting to. What kind of partnership? A permanent solution. For what problem? The roadway issue. Roadway issue. She couldn't even say ownership. I watched her carefully. For someone acting confident, she seemed oddly nervous whenever the road came up, like she needed it, not wanted it. Needed it. A construction truck appeared around the bend behind her, then another. Both entered through the canyon without hesitation, using my road. One clipped the edge of a cattle fence while turning. The fence post snapped sideways. The driver didn't even stop. I stared at it, then at Vanessa. She glanced at the damage, and shrugged. That told me more than any document could. She didn't care about the land. She cared about access. The fence was simply collateral damage. You should probably leave. The smile disappeared entirely now. I don't think that's realistic. I wasn't asking. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she reached into her purse and handed me a business card. Heavy cardstock, gold lettering, HOA President. Ridgecrest Estates Community Association. Very impressive. I looked at it, then slipped it into my pocket. I'll keep this. Good. You'll save me time when I need to know who to send legal notices to. Both surveyors looked at her. Vanessa's expression hardened. Ethan, you're making a mistake. No. I glanced toward the canyon road. The only road. The one every truck entering Ridgecrest depended on. I think somebody already made one. The surveyors quietly packed their equipment. Vanessa remained standing there, still trying to project confidence, but I could see the cracks now. Tiny ones, almost invisible, yet definitely there. As I drove away, I checked my mirror. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the road, the same way people stare at something they're afraid of losing. 3 days later, construction crews arrived before sunrise, and that's when the real war started. The sound of diesel engines pulled me out of bed before 6 in the morning. I stepped onto the porch and immediately saw half a dozen trucks parked along the canyon road. Workers were unloading equipment. Survey flags had multiplied overnight. Someone had spray-painted utility markings across sections of pasture that absolutely did not belong to Ridgecrest. I grabbed my phone and started recording. The first thing I noticed was confidence. Nobody was acting like they might be on private property. Nobody was asking permission. They moved with the certainty of people who'd been told ownership wasn't a problem. That bothered me more than the equipment. Because confidence like that usually comes from somewhere, or someone. By 7:30, I had photographs of damaged grass, fresh trench markers, and tire tracks crossing beyond the legal easement area. Then I made a call. His name was Nolan Price. If Wyoming had a living legend among surveyors, it was Nolan. He'd spent 40 years mapping ranches, roads, and property lines across 3 counties. People trusted him because he didn't care who won. He cared where the line actually was. 2 days later, Nolan arrived in a dusty pickup carrying old survey maps and enough equipment to make a county engineer jealous. We spent the morning walking the canyon road. He barely spoke, just measured. Marked. Compared coordinates. Every few minutes, he'd grunt to himself and write something down. Around noon, he stopped beside the concrete survey marker I'd photographed earlier, the same one sitting near the suspicious red line. Nolan crouched beside it, studied the base, then looked at me. When did you first notice this? A couple weeks ago. He nodded slowly, then took a screwdriver and scraped at the concrete. Fresh material appeared underneath, much newer than the original foundation. Nolan stood up. Well, I hated that word. Surveyors only said well when they found trouble. What? He pointed at the marker. That thing's been moved. I already suspected it. Hearing it from Nolan was different. You're sure? Absolutely. He walked a short distance away and compared measurements against his maps. Then he checked again. And again. Finally, he looked back toward the canyon road. The original position was over there. He pointed nearly 20 feet west, exactly where the county records suggested. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Because moving a property marker wasn't some harmless mistake. It changed legal boundaries. It changed perceptions. And in this case, it made Ridgecrest's access corridor appear much larger than it really was. Nolan stared toward the subdivision. Someone wanted people believing the road belonged to them. The worst part? He wasn't finished. Not even close. Later that afternoon, we spread maps across the hood of my truck. Nolan compared modern records against archived easement filings. Then his eyebrows pulled together. What is it? He tapped one document. Something doesn't make sense. I stepped closer. The paperwork referenced an emergency access easement dating back decades. Nothing unusual there. Many ranch properties had similar agreements, but Nolan kept flipping pages, then stopped. Where's the renewal? What renewal? This easement. He pointed at the document. It required periodic renewal. My stomach tightened. How often? Every 10 years. I looked at the date, then looked again. The last renewal listed was older than I expected. Much older. Nolan continued searching. More records. More filings. Nothing. No extension. No replacement agreement. No permanent acquisition. Nothing. That shouldn't have been possible. A subdivision the size of Ridgecrest couldn't operate without legal access. Could it? Nolan finally exhaled. Ethan. The way he said my name told me this was serious. Tell me, if these records are complete, Ridgecrest may be relying on an easement that no longer exists. I stared at him. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misunderstood. You're saying the road rights expired? I'm saying I can't find evidence they're still valid. That was different. But not by much. We spent another 2 days verifying everything. County filings, property transfers, archived surveys. Every path led back to the same uncomfortable question. How had Ridgecrest been approved? Because if Nolan was right, somebody should have caught this years ago. Long before hundreds of homes were built. Long before Vanessa Holloway started talking about Phase 2 expansion. On the third day Nolan called me. His voice sounded unusually serious. I found something. An hour later, we sat inside the county records office. Nolan slid a document across the table. An engineering review. Several years old. Buried inside unrelated infrastructure paperwork. One sentence had been highlighted. Existing roadway access requires legal verification prior to future expansion approval. I read it twice. Then a third time. The room suddenly felt smaller. Someone had already identified the problem. Someone inside the system knew there were unresolved questions about access. And somehow Ridgecrest kept expanding anyway. Nolan leaned back in his chair. That's not good. No. It means somebody ignored a warning. Outside the records office, I sat in my truck for nearly 20 minutes. Not because I was confused. Because for the first time I could see the shape of the problem. This wasn't just an HOA acting entitled. This wasn't just Vanessa being aggressive. This was bigger. The moved marker. The red line. The questionable easement. The ignored warning. All of it pointed toward the same possibility. Somebody knew there was a problem with that road. The only question left was who knew first, and whether Vanessa Holloway was one of them. I didn't have that answer yet. What I did have was a growing stack of documents and an HOA that suddenly seemed determined to bury me under a larger one. The first certified letter arrived 4 days later. I found it wedged inside my mailbox when I returned from checking fences along the northern pasture. Ridge Crest Estates Community Association. Official letterhead. Attorney signature. The language was exactly what I expected. Interference with community infrastructure. Obstruction of approved development. Potential liability for damages. I read the entire thing twice, then filed it in a folder. The second letter arrived 2 days later. The third came the following week. Each one more aggressive than the last. Each one treating my property as though ownership itself had become an inconvenience. Vanessa wasn't trying to prove she was right. She was trying to make defending myself expensive. That strategy works surprisingly often. Most people don't have the money, time, or patience to fight organizations with lawyers. Fortunately for me, my father had spent 40 years teaching a different lesson. Document everything. I bought 3 storage boxes, one for photographs, one for correspondence, one for records. Then I started building a case. Every construction vehicle entering through the canyon got photographed. Every damaged fence post, every survey marker, every truck crossing beyond the legal easement area. Date, time, location, evidence. The process was boring, which is exactly why it works. Good documentation isn't dramatic, it's relentless. Meanwhile, Vanessa took her campaign public. At first, it stayed inside Ridge Crest. Then it spread. A local community Facebook page began filling with complaints. Posts appeared claiming I wanted to shut down emergency access. Others claimed I was trying to extort. The HOA. One post described me as a wealthy landowner holding families hostage. That one almost made me laugh. My ranch was worth plenty on paper. My truck had 200,000 miles on it. The comments bothered me less than the pattern. Every story sounded strangely similar. Same language, same accusations, same talking points. Someone was feeding them. And I had a pretty good idea who. A week later, I walked into Miller's grocery and immediately felt the difference. Conversations stopped. Not completely, just enough. People looked away. A cashier who'd known my family for years asked if the rumors were true. I asked which rumors. She hesitated. The ones about you blocking roads. There it was. Vanessa wasn't fighting me in court yet. She was fighting me in public. And public opinion is often cheaper than legal filings. That evening, I drove past Ridge Crest. The Phase 2 banners were already up. Coming soon. Luxury Canyon Estates. The signs sat beside the same road they were claiming as community infrastructure. My road. That detail mattered. A lot. Because if Nolan Price was right, every new home they approved increased their exposure. Every new buyer increased the risk. And every truck rolling through the canyon made the problem bigger. Then things escalated. One morning I found 3 HOA board members standing inside my lower pasture. Not near it, inside it. One was taking photographs. Another held a clipboard. The third was measuring distances toward the creek. I parked the truck and walked over. "What are you doing?" All 3 turned. The nervous one looked uncomfortable immediately. The woman with the clipboard didn't. "We're conducting a community assessment." "Of my ranch?" She ignored the question. Interesting. That seemed contagious among HOA leadership. Then Vanessa appeared. Of course she did. She always seemed to arrive right when things crossed a line. "Good morning, Ethan." "No." Her smile tightened. "No. This isn't a good morning. It's trespassing." The nervous board member looked down. Vanessa didn't. "We're evaluating future opportunities. For land you don't own. For land connected to Ridge Crest." There it was again. Connected. Not owned. Not leased. Not granted. Connected. A carefully chosen word. I pointed toward the fence. "Leave." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You continue to isolate yourself." I almost laughed. She sounded like I was refusing to join a book club. "This is private property." "According to your interpretation." That sentence told me everything. Not according to the deeds, not according to surveys. According to my interpretation. Meaning she already knew the facts weren't on her side. She was trying to redefine them. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Board members, clipboard. Measurements. Everything. Vanessa's smile disappeared. "You really think paperwork is going to save you?" I looked directly at her. For the first time, all conversation stopped. Even the board members waited. Then I answered, "I think paperwork is exactly what you're afraid of." Nobody spoke, not even Vanessa. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough. Because I saw it. A crack. Tiny. Almost invisible. But definitely there. For the first time since this started, Vanessa looked uncertain. As if she was beginning to realize I wasn't going away. As if she understood that every threat, every letter, every rumor campaign was creating something she couldn't control. A record. And records have a way of surviving long after stories fall apart. The next breakthrough came from somewhere nobody expected. A dusty basement archive beneath the county courthouse. And what we found down there changed everything. By that point, I knew two things. First, someone had moved a legal boundary marker. Second, the easement Ridge Crest depended on might not be valid anymore. Both were serious. Neither explained how a 250-home subdivision had been approved in the first place. To answer that question, I needed help. That's when Rachel Cole entered the HOA story. Rachel was a property attorney based in Casper. No flashy advertisements, no dramatic courtroom reputation, just a long history of winning cases because she read documents other lawyers ignored. I handed her 3 boxes. Photographs, survey reports, county records. The certified letters from Ridge Crest. She spent nearly 2 hours reviewing everything before saying a word. Finally, she closed the last folder. "You're not dealing with a normal property dispute." That wasn't comforting. What am I dealing with? Rachel tapped the engineering memo Nolan had discovered. The moment someone raised concerns about roadway ownership, this stopped being simple. I already knew that. What don't I know? She leaned back. "I think someone knew there was a problem long before you came back to the ranch." That thought had been sitting in the back of my mind for weeks. Rachel simply said it out loud. The next morning, we drove to the county archives. The basement looked exactly like every government storage room in America. Metal shelves, dusty boxes. Decades of paperwork. The kind of place where important things disappear because nobody bothers looking. Fortunately, Rachel enjoyed looking. For 2 days, we searched through planning records tied to Ridgecrest, development approvals, environmental reviews, road permits, utility extensions. Most of it looked ordinary. Then patterns started appearing. The same names showed up repeatedly, the same departments, the same signatures. More importantly, the same missing answers. Rachel noticed it first. Look at this. She slid a planning packet across the table. Inside was correspondence related to Ridgecrest's first expansion phase. Nothing remarkable, until the last page, a county engineering review. Short. Easy to miss. One sentence had been underlined years earlier. Future development should not proceed until roadway ownership concerns are resolved. I stared at it, then read it again. The wording wasn't vague. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. Someone inside county government had identified the problem. Years ago. Rachel looked up. And yet Phase 2 still moved forward. The implication hung in the air. Somebody ignored the warning, or somebody buried it. Neither possibility was good. We kept digging, hour after hour, box after box. Then something strange happened. Rachel found references to attachments that no longer existed. Emails listed in planning files, supporting correspondence, missing, not deleted, just absent. That bothered her immediately. It bothered me too. Because paperwork leaves footprints, even when pages disappear. Late that afternoon, an older records clerk named Margaret stopped beside our table. She'd worked in the archives longer than anyone could remember. You two still chasing Ridgecrest? Rachel nodded. Margaret frowned. That development has generated more records requests than anything else in the county. Interesting. Why? The woman shrugged. People keep asking questions. What kind of questions? Access. There was that word again. Always access. Never ownership. Margaret pointed toward a stack of storage boxes near the rear wall. Try zoning attachments. Then she walked away. Rachel and I spent another hour searching. Finally, she opened a packet labeled Supplemental Planning Correspondence. Inside sat a collection of attachments accidentally filed under the wrong case number. Most were irrelevant. One wasn't. Rachel froze. Actually froze. I noticed immediately. What? She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me the document. An internal engineering communication. Several years old. Not addressed to county officials. Addressed to consultants working with Ridgecrest. The message wasn't explosive. Not yet. But it contained one sentence that made my pulse quicken. Unresolved roadway ownership presents future development risk if permanent access rights are not secured. I looked at Rachel, then back at the paper, then back at Rachel. That's bad. No. She shook her head slowly. It's worse. Because now the timeline mattered. The warning wasn't created after construction, wasn't written during a lawsuit. It existed years before Phase 2 planning began. Someone connected to the project knew there was a problem. The only question was whether that information ever reached Ridgecrest leadership. Rachel carefully placed the document inside a folder. We keep going. For the next several hours, we traced every reference connected to the communication. Consultants, law firms, planning reviews, development filings. The deeper we looked, the more uncomfortable the story became. This wasn't beginning to look like negligence. It was starting to look deliberate. That night I drove home through the canyon long after sunset. Construction lights glowed across the ridge crest hillside. Crews were still working. Homes were still being marketed. More buyers were still signing contracts. All while questions about legal access remained unresolved. For the first time, I realized something important. Vanessa might not be fighting to win. She might be fighting to keep people from discovering what she already knew. And if that was true, somewhere in those records was proof. The next document we found would answer the question once and for all. Did Vanessa Holloway know about the risk, or was she about to become the victim of someone else's deception? For nearly a week, Rachel and I chased that answer through county records, planning files, and archived correspondence. The deeper we dug, the narrower the list became. Every major decision connected to Ridge Crest's expansion eventually passed through the same people. Developers, consultants, law firms, and Vanessa Holloway. What we needed wasn't suspicion. We needed proof. Proof arrived by accident, the way important discoveries often do. 3 days after finding the engineering communication, Rachel called me just after lunch. Her voice sounded different, not excited, focused. "Ethan, what did you find?" "I think you should come to my office." That was all she said. An hour later, I was sitting across from her conference table. A single document rested between us. One page, one email. Rachel slid it toward me. "Read the highlighted section." I did. The message came from a junior attorney working for a consulting firm involved in Ridgecrest's expansion planning. The date stopped me immediately. 4 years earlier. Long before I returned to Mercer Ranch. Long before Phase 2 construction. Long before the lawsuits. The subject line read, "Access Risk Assessment." I kept reading. The language was technical. Legal. Easy to overlook. Then I reached the highlighted paragraph. Future development may become dependent upon roadway access, not currently secured through permanent ownership or enforceable long-term agreement. I looked up. Rachel didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The meaning was obvious. The attorney wasn't guessing. He was warning them. The email continued. Failure to resolve ownership questions prior to expansion may expose future development to legal and financial liability. I read that sentence twice, then a third time. The room felt very quiet. Who received this? Rachel pointed toward the distribution list. Several consultants, 2 development executives, a law firm representative, and one more name. Vanessa Holloway. There it was. Not speculation, not assumption, not rumor. Her name. Right there, attached to the warning. My first reaction wasn't satisfaction. It was disbelief. Because once you cross from possibility into proof, everything changes. Rachel leaned back. She knew. I nodded slowly. She knew. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Permanent. For months, Vanessa had acted offended every time ownership came up. She'd mocked my concerns, threatened lawsuits, accused me of obstructing progress. All while sitting on an email warning her exactly what the problem was. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a decision, a deliberate one. The next question came immediately. How many people knew? Rachel opened another folder. That's the problem. Inside sat planning approvals connected to Phase 2, marketing materials, expansion proposals, public presentations. Every one of them had been created after the warning email. Everyone. The timeline was devastating, because it meant Ridgecrest continued growing despite knowing access remained unresolved. New lots were approved. New homes were marketed. New buyers signed contracts. Nobody was told. I stood and walked toward the office window. For the first time since this started, I wasn't thinking about Vanessa. I was thinking about the homeowners. Families who bought houses believing everything had been secured, people who trusted the HOA leadership, people who probably had no idea their subdivision depended on a road trapped inside an unresolved legal question. Rachel broke the silence. Do you understand what this means? Yeah.
We both
No.
know how this ends.
She shook her head.
The easement holds.
I mean legally.
regardless of what this paperwork
I
says.
turned back toward her. If leadership knew about the risk and failed to disclose it, she let the sentence hang. I finished it. They exposed everyone. Exactly. That was the moment the case changed. Up until then, Vanessa had painted me as the threat, the stubborn ranch owner, the obstacle, the guy standing in the way of development. Now the facts told a different story. The real danger wasn't my road. The real danger was the truth. And the truth was sitting inside a 4-year-old email. Word about the dispute continued spreading through town. Construction still moved forward. The Phase 2 banners still hung over Ridgecrest's entrance. Vanessa continued giving interviews about community growth and future investment. As if nothing had changed. As if the warning email didn't exist. That confidence puzzled me at first. Then Rachel explained it. She thinks you'll settle. What makes you say that? Because most people do. She wasn't wrong. Lawsuits are expensive, time-consuming, exhausting. Many people eventually choose peace over principle. Vanessa expected me to do the same. The problem was she misunderstood something. I wasn't fighting because I wanted money. I was fighting because somebody moved a legal boundary marker, ignored warnings, and built an expansion project on top of a question they never answered. By that point, I couldn't walk away even if I wanted to. The truth mattered. And now we had evidence. Real evidence. The kind judges care about. The kind juries remember. The kind that survives long after speeches stop working. 3 weeks later, Vanessa made the biggest mistake of the entire dispute. She filed a lawsuit. And in doing so, she handed us exactly what Rachel had been waiting for. The complaint arrived by certified mail on a Tuesday morning. Ridgecrest Estates Community Association versus Ethan Mercer. 3 inches thick, dozens of pages, multiple attorneys. Exactly the kind of document designed to intimidate people before a judge ever gets involved. I sat at my kitchen table and read every word. Then I read it again. Vanessa's attorneys claimed I was interfering with essential community infrastructure. They accused me of creating development delays. They demanded permanent roadway access rights across my ranch. They even requested damages. Damages. For strong property they didn't own. The arrogance almost impressed me. Almost. I drove the filing straight to Rachel's office. She skimmed the first few pages. Then something unexpected happened. She smiled. Not a polite smile, not a reassuring smile, The kind of smile attorneys get when the other side accidentally helps them. What? Rachel turned the document around. Read paragraph 12. I did. Twice. Then a third time. The lawsuit described the Canyon Road as critical access infrastructure necessary for existing residential occupancy and future subdivision expansion. I looked up. Rachel was already nodding. They admitted it. What exactly? They admitted dependence. That word mattered. A lot. Because for months, Vanessa had been trying to minimize the issue. Now her own lawsuit formally acknowledged something completely different. The entire subdivision depended on my road. Not preferred. Not benefited from. Depended on. That changed everything. Rachel grabbed a yellow marker and highlighted several sections. Every one contained the same problem. The HOA wasn't arguing the road was convenient. They were arguing it was essential. The more we read, the worse it got for them. The filing referenced future development. Phase 2 construction. Additional residential growth. Every paragraph strengthened our position, because every sentence raised the same question. Why continue expanding if legal access remained unresolved? Vanessa had spent months trying to avoid that conversation. Now her lawyers had placed it directly into the court record. A week later, Ridgecrest announced Phase 2 publicly. Again. Bigger signs, more advertising, more promises, luxury lots, future growth, premium canyon living. The timing couldn't have been worse. Every new marketing campaign created additional exposure. Every new lot sold increased potential liability. Rachel called it pouring gasoline on paperwork. I thought that description fit perfectly. Meanwhile, construction activity intensified. Trucks moved through the canyon daily. Contractors worked, weekends. Utility crews appeared near the eastern section of the property. I photographed everything. Not because I enjoyed it, because evidence compounds over time. One afternoon, I counted 47 separate vehicle crossings before lunch. 47. All relying on the same disputed roadway. The same roadway Vanessa claimed wasn't a problem. That evening, I spotted her standing near the entrance to Ridgecrest. Alone. No board members. No surveyors. No contractors. Just Vanessa. Watching the road. I pulled over. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she broke the silence. You could stop this. Interesting. Not we could solve this. Not let's negotiate. You could stop this. Meaning she already understood where the leverage existed. I didn't start it. Her expression tightened. You know what I mean. I did. She wanted me to back down. Accept some compromise. Allow the expansion to continue. Pretend the documents didn't exist. Pretend the warning email never happened. Pretend the red line had never moved. But it was too late for that. The facts were already larger than both of us. You should have addressed this years ago. The words landed harder than I expected. For a brief second, she looked exhausted. Then it vanished, replaced by the same confidence she'd worn since the beginning. I'll see you in court. That was the last thing she said before walking away. At the time, I thought it sounded like a threat. Later, I realized it was a mistake. Because courtrooms care about evidence, and evidence was becoming our strongest weapon. Over the following weeks, Rachel built the case piece by piece. Survey reports from Nolan Price. Photographs of the relocated boundary marker, the engineering memo, the warning email, the HOA letters, the lawsuit itself. Each document connected to the next, like links in a chain. And the chain led directly back to Ridgecrest leadership. Then the hearing date arrived. The courthouse parking lot filled before sunrise. Homeowners, reporters, contractors, county officials. Everyone wanted to see what happened next. Most still believed this was a fight between a stubborn ranch owner and an HOA president. They didn't understand what was really on trial. The road wasn't the story anymore. The truth was. And by the end of the hearing, the entire county was about to find out. The courthouse was already packed when Rachel and I arrived. Homeowners filled the gallery. Reporters stood along the walls. Several contractors sat near the back, watching nervously. Even people with no connection to Ridgecrest had shown up. Small counties love a good dispute. But this wasn't entertainment anymore. Too much money was involved. Too many people lived behind that gate. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes later. Dark suit, perfect posture. 3 attorneys, the same confidence she'd carried from the beginning. At least on the surface. The hearing started with Ridgecrest's legal team. For nearly 40 minutes, they repeated the same arguments. Community reliance, economic impact, development delays, public necessity. They described me as unreasonable, obstructive, hostile to growth. The language sounded impressive. The evidence behind it didn't. Rachel never interrupted. She simply took notes. That worried me more than any speech, because Rachel only stayed quiet when she knew something bigger was coming. Eventually, the judge turned toward our table. Miss Cole. Rachel stood, carried a thin folder to the podium, and changed the entire direction of the hearing with one sentence. This is not a roadway dispute. The courtroom became noticeably quieter. Rachel continued. This is a disclosure case. Several people frowned. Vanessa's lead attorney immediately objected. The judge overruled him. Rachel placed the first document before the court. The engineering memo. The one warning officials about unresolved roadway ownership. Then came the survey evidence. Nolan Price took the stand. Watching Nolan testify felt like watching a man explain gravity. No drama, no exaggeration, just facts. He walked through measurements, coordinates, historical maps, photographs. Then Rachel asked the question everyone was waiting for. Mr. Price, in your professional opinion, was the original boundary marker relocated? Yes. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just yes. The room shifted. I could feel it. People stopped looking at me. They started looking at Vanessa. Rachel wasn't finished. She projected photographs onto the courtroom screen. The original marker location, the moved marker, the red survey line extending deeper into Mercer Ranch. Homeowners whispered to each other. Several looked genuinely confused, because for the first time they could see the problem. Literally. The evidence wasn't theoretical anymore. It was sitting 10 feet tall on a projector screen. Vanessa's attorney tried redirecting, tried discussing historical use, community benefit, practical necessity. The arguments sounded weaker every minute. Then Rachel delivered the document that mattered most. The email. The room fell silent before she even finished introducing it. Future development may become dependent upon roadway access not currently secured through permanent ownership or enforceable long-term agreement. Rachel read the words slowly. every syllable landing harder than the last. Then she displayed the distribution list. Consultants, developers, attorneys, and Vanessa Holloway. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Vanessa's attorney stood immediately, but even he looked rattled. Because the problem wasn't the email itself. The problem was the date. 4 years before Phase 2, 4 years before the lawsuits, 4 years before all the public promises. Rachel looked directly at the judge. Ridgecrest leadership received this warning before approving additional expansion. The gallery erupted into whispers. One homeowner actually stood. What? The bailiff quickly restored order. But the damage was done. People had heard it. And once people hear the truth, they start connecting dots. Rachel called one final witness, the county engineer, the same nervous man who would later stand near the ambulance during the storm. At the time, nobody knew how important he would become. He looked uncomfortable from the moment he took the stand. Rachel asked only a few questions. Simple questions. Precise questions. Then she reached the one that mattered. Did your office previously recommend legal clarification before Phase 2 expansion approval? The engineer swallowed. Yes. The room became completely still. Rachel continued. Was that clarification completed? A long pause followed. The longest pause of the entire hearing. Then he answered. No. Everything changed. Instantly. Homeowners turned toward Vanessa. Not me. Vanessa. A man near the front row stood up halfway from his seat. You told us everything was approved. Another homeowner spoke up. What do you mean, unresolved? Someone else asked about mortgages, property values, access rights. Questions started spreading through the gallery faster than the attorneys could stop them. The judge threatened to clear the room. It barely helped. The trust was already broken. Vanessa looked around as if searching for a way to regain control. There wasn't one. Because paperwork had done something arguments never could. It had trapped the truth in writing. The hearing ended without a final ruling that day. It didn't need one. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Ridgecrest residents. Questions flew in every direction. The crowd that once blamed me now wanted answers from the HOA. Real answers. For the first time since this started, nobody was asking why I protected my property. They were asking why Vanessa hadn't protected them. And standing beside my truck, watching homeowners confront the very person who had spent months attacking me, I realized the battle was effectively over. The courtroom hadn't destroyed Ridgecrest. The truth had. What happened next would determine whether the subdivision survived at all. The first cracks appeared within days of the hearing. Then the cracks became fractures. Then the fractures became lawsuits. Homeowners who had spent months defending Ridgecrest suddenly started asking questions nobody on the HOA board wanted to answer. When did you know? What were you told? Why weren't residents informed? How many documents existed? Those questions spread through the subdivision faster than any rumor Vanessa had ever started about me. The difference was simple. Rumors disappear when facts arrive. Facts were arriving every day. Within 2 weeks, the county suspended all Phase 2 approvals pending legal review. Construction crews vanished almost overnight. Half-finished foundations sat untouched. Stacks of lumber remained wrapped in plastic. The large promotional banners at the subdivision entrance stopped attracting buyers and started attracting reporters. Banks noticed next. Banks always notice uncertainty. Once lenders learned Ridgecrest's future expansion depended on unresolved roadway access, financing became harder to secure. Property sales slowed. Investors disappeared. Developers stopped returning phone calls. The growth machine Vanessa had spent years building suddenly stalled, and without growth, her authority began collapsing. Meanwhile, I still hadn't closed the road. That surprised a lot of people. Several homeowners approached me directly after the hearing. Not to argue, to talk. One family had lived in Ridgecrest for nearly a decade. Another had bought a home only 8 months earlier. Most weren't villains. Most weren't developers. Most weren't involved in moving survey markers or hiding emails. They were people who trusted the wrong leadership. Rachel understood that before I did. One afternoon, she spread a draft agreement across her desk. We need to separate residents from the HOA. I looked at the paperwork. What do you mean? You aren't fighting homeowners. She was right. I never had been. The agreement created a solution. Emergency vehicles could continue using the road. School buses could continue using the road. Residents could continue using the road. Utility companies could continue using the road. But everything would happen under a written access agreement acknowledging a simple fact. The roadway crossed Mercer Ranch property. No ambiguity, no creative language, no infrastructure corridor, no community access route. Property. The truth in writing. When the proposal reached Ridgecrest, the reaction was immediate. Several board members supported it. Vanessa didn't. Of course she didn't. Because signing the agreement meant admitting everything she had spent months denying. Ownership mattered. The road mattered. The documents mattered. Most importantly, she had been wrong. For a while she fought it, publicly, aggressively. Then the board meeting happened. I wasn't inside the room. But enough people told me the story afterward that I could practically see it. Residents packed every chair. Board members looked exhausted. Questions came nonstop. The hidden email, the engineering memo, the lawsuit, the road, the expansion, everything. Then one board member stood. His name was Ben Walker. I'd seen him several times during the dispute, usually standing behind Vanessa, usually staying quiet. Not that night. That night he made a motion. Accept the Mercer Access Agreement. Remove Vanessa Holloway as acting HOA president pending investigation. The room reportedly went silent. Vanessa stared at him, then at the other board members. One by one, they voted. The motion passed, just like that. The most powerful person in Ridgecrest lost the position she'd used to control the entire conflict. Not because of me, because of the truth. Within a month, the new board signed the agreement. The county approved it. The road reopened under clear legal terms. The emergency access concerns disappeared. School buses continued their routes. Families continued living their lives. The subdivision survived. The illusion did not. As for Vanessa, she resigned before any additional hearings took place. The last reliable information I heard suggested she left Wyoming entirely. No farewell speech, no public apology, just gone. The lawsuits against former HOA leadership continued long after that, but they no longer involved me. My role ended when the facts became public. Months later, winter settled across the ranch. One cold morning, I stood beside the canyon entrance watching frost cover the pasture. The steel gate remained exactly where it had always been. Only one thing looked different. A new sign, simple, honest, impossible to misunderstand. Private Ranch Road. Access by written agreement only. Only, I stared at it for a long moment, then looked down the road toward Ridge Crest. Cars still passed through. School buses still crossed the canyon. Life moved forward. The difference was that everyone finally understood where the road actually belonged. My father used to say that ownership isn't about fences, it's about boundaries. The people who respect them earn trust. The people who ignore them eventually meet reality. Vanessa Holloway spent years believing confidence could replace ownership. She believed enough money, enough pressure, and enough paperwork could change the truth. In the end, the opposite happened. The paperwork revealed it. Because confidence fades, stories change, power shifts, but records remain.
And documentation lasts forever. One lesson I took away from this whole experience is that problems rarely get smaller when people ignore them. In this story, the road issue wasn't created by one storm night or one courtroom hearing. It grew because questions were left unanswered, warnings were overlooked, and people assumed someone else had already done the hard work of checking the facts. What finally brought clarity wasn't anger, money, or loud argument. It was patience, documentation, and a willingness to keep looking for the truth when it would have been easier to walk away. There's something reassuring about that. In a world where opinions change every day, facts still matter, boundary matter, agreement matter, and treating people fairly matter. Sometimes standing your ground doesn't mean raising your voice. Sometimes it just means staying steady long enough for the truth to catch up. I'd love to hear what you think. If you ever deal with an HOA dispute, a property line issue, or a situation where paperwork ended up telling the real story, drop a comment below. And if you believe people should protect what they're while treating others with fairness and respect, type yes in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about range life, land pride, quiet perseverance, and ordinary people standing firm through difficult situations, consider subscribing to the channel. We got plenty more story ahead. I'd be blessed to have you along for the ride.